In Pardoning reality TV stars Todd and Julie Chrisley, Trump taps into a sense of persecution felt. Hello, everyone. Welcome back for another video. I hope everyone's having a great day. Before watching the video, please subscribe and like it. President Donald Trump has never met Todd Chrisley, the reality TV star that he pardoned on May 27, 2025, along with Chrisley's wife, Julie. But the pair have much in common. Both are admired by their fans for their brash personas and salty riposts. Both enjoy lavish lifestyles. Trump is known for his real estate deals and Rococo White House redecoration, and Chrisley for his entrepreneurial skill and acquisitions of sprawling properties. Quick-tempered tycoons, they live large and keep score, especially when people cross them. And maybe most importantly, both have run into legal trouble with Georgia prosecutors. In 2019, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia indicted the Chrisleys for fraud and tax evasion, and the Fulton County District Attorney filed charges against Trump in 2023. In 2022, Todd and Julie Chrisley were tried in Fulton County, found guilty, and sentenced to 12 and 7-year sentences, respectively. A year later, a Fulton County grand jury indicted Trump as part of an alleged conspiracy to overturn the 2020 presidential election results in Georgia, a case that's currently in limbo. After the Chrisleys went to prison, their daughter Savannah began campaigning for their release. Her efforts to win over prominent conservatives, including her outspoken support for Trump, led to a primetime appearance at the 2024 Republican National Convention. "My family has been persecuted by rogue prosecutors due to our public profile and conservative beliefs," she told the delegates and a television audience of 15 million viewers. Turning an insult into an accolade, she claimed prosecutors had called them the Trumps of the South. Her framing of her parents' imprisonment aligns with Trump's broader campaign narrative of victimization, redemption, and retribution, which critics say he has continued to promote and carry out during his second term. Preaching perfection, like Trump, who starred on The Apprentice for 11 years, the Chrisleys had their own reality television show. Chrisley Knows Best aired on USA Network from 2014 to 2023. I'm familiar with the Chrisleys because I wrote about Todd in a 2018 book I co-edited on religion and reality television. The show was particularly popular among viewers in their 30s, who were fascinated by the Chrisleys' extravagant lifestyle and Todd's over-the-top personality. The self-proclaimed patriarch of perfection, Todd flew twice a month to Los Angeles from Atlanta, and later Nashville, to have his hair cut and highlighted. He spoke freely about using Botox and invited viewers into his room-sized closet, where his clothes were organized by color. No matter the time of day, Todd was camera-ready, buffed, manicured, and dressed in designer clothes. The family enjoyed all the trappings of success: fancy cars, a palatial home, and expensive vacations. Yet, in almost every episode, Todd made clear that his life, and theirs by extension, centered on family, religion, and responsibility. In fact, many episodes revolved around Todd's efforts to promote these values through his parenting lessons. On the one hand, Todd tried to teach responsibility and the value of hard work to his 5 children. On the other hand, he bribed and cajoled them into doing what he wanted. Todd seemed to have it both ways. His strictness and traditional values appealed to Christian viewers, but his sass and cussing won over secular audiences. Yet sometimes his words rang hollow. Todd talked a lot about work, but viewers rarely saw him at a job. He frequently quoted the Bible, but audiences seldom saw him in church. He extolled family, but a few years into the series, his 2 older children, Lindsay and Kyle, disappeared from the show. In 2023, the series disappeared too. By then, the Chrisleys were in prison. Trump knows best. On the day of his inauguration, when Trump pardoned or commuted the sentences of the roughly 1,500 people involved in the January 6, 2021, insurrection, he vowed to take appropriate action to correct past misconduct by the federal government related to the weaponization of law enforcement. The imprisonment of Todd and Julie Chrisley and his pardoning of them is just that. Your parents are going to be free and clean, and I hope that we can do it by tomorrow, Trump told Savannah Chrisley in a recorded phone conversation. They've been given a pretty harsh treatment based on what I'm hearing. Trump's pardons, which have freed a number of conservatives convicted of fraud, may stem from his belief that he and many others have been falsely accused and persecuted by the elite, liberal establishment. But the pardons also strike home for his right-wing religious supporters, many of whom think that Democrats will do anything to quash their faith, including using the justice system to specifically target Christians. We live in a nation founded on freedom, liberty, and justice for all. Justice is supposed to be blind. But today, we have a two-faced justice system. Savannah Chrisley said during her RNC speech, "Look at what they are doing to countless Christians and conservatives, that the government has labeled them extremists or even worse." While those claims have been disputed, eradicating anti-Christian bias, at home and abroad, has nevertheless become a centerpiece of Trump's policies during his second term. The lawyers who prosecuted the Chrisleys had a different perspective. They called Todd and Julie career swindlers who have made a living by jumping from one fraud scheme to another, lying to banks, stiffing vendors, and evading taxes at every corner, and whose reputations were based on the lie that their wealth came from dedication and hard work. The couple were ultimately found guilty of defrauding Atlanta area banks of $36 million by using falsified papers to apply for mortgages, obtaining false loans to repay older loans, and not repaying those loans. They also were convicted of hiding their true income from the IRS and owing $500,000 in back taxes. At his sentencing, Todd said that he intended to pay it all back. At a press conference after his pardon, he said he was convicted for something he did not do. In the days since their release, the Chrisleys announced they were filming a new reality show, which will air on Lifetime. The series will focus on the couple's legal struggles, imprisonment, pardon, and reunification. Thanks to the constitutional protections of the presidency, Trump's re-election has shielded him from ongoing federal criminal prosecution. And now, thanks to the stroke of Trump's pen, the Trumps of the South are back in business too. In a move that reignited both celebration and controversy across the country, the unexpected pardon of reality television couple Todd and Julie Chrisley by former President Donald Trump has thrust the famously dramatic Chrisley household back into the center of America's cultural and political conversation after years of courtroom battles, convictions, prison time, and public silence. The pardon delivered an emotional jolt not only to the Chrisleys and their fans, but to a deeply loyal segment of Trump's political base, one that sees the couple as both symbols and victims within a system they view as increasingly hostile to conservative Christian values. The decision came as a surprise not just because of the legal weight behind the couple's tax and fraud convictions, but because of what it represents: a calculated message to a demographic that has long felt scrutinized, sidelined, and targeted by mainstream media and institutions. For Trump to step in and pardon a couple whose public image has been steeped in faith, family, and Southern tradition is to reaffirm his place as a protector of those who feel the country no longer reflects their values, and more importantly, a signal that their voices still matter in the fight over America's cultural identity. Todd and Julie, once stars of a wildly popular reality show built around their family dynamics and extravagant lifestyle, became unlikely martyrs in the eyes of many after their legal downfall. Their conviction on charges of conspiracy to defraud the United States, tax evasion, and bank fraud had all the trappings of a scandal, but to their most fervent supporters, the entire ordeal became a symbol of overreach and selective prosecution. Fans insisted the couple had been unfairly targeted, not just for their wealth, but for their outspoken Christian identity and close alignment with conservative principles. This perception of persecution is not new in American politics, But the Chrisley's case ignited it anew among a base that already viewed federal institutions with suspicion. Supporters watched the couple go from adored to vilified, from red carpet appearances to prison sentences, and many could not help but interpret that journey through a lens of political and cultural warfare. In their eyes, the government had made an example out of two faith-filled parents who dared to be vocal about their beliefs on a national stage, and the media's coverage only cemented their sense to pardon the couple. He did more than erase their convictions. He validated a narrative that has been building for years among his base, a belief that Christian conservatives are under siege from an elite class determined to silence faith, shame patriotism, and punish traditional values. The move tapped directly into an emotional reservoir of grievance, frustration, and longing for justice, not just for the Chrisleys, but for millions who feel similarly unheard and misrepresented in modern America. Todd, in particular, has always stood at the intersection of contradiction and clarity, a man of faith, flamboyance, and fierce family loyalty. He became a poster child for conservative Christians who also embraced individuality. His firm grip on family values, Bible verses woven into daily conversation, and his unapologetic stance on prayer and grace helped define the Chrisley brand far beyond reality television. To many, he wasn't just entertaining, he was aspirational, a reminder that faith could flourish even in fame, and that Christian identity didn't require conformity. Julie, too, has long been seen as the rock of the family, and matriarch of strength, warmth, and devotion. Her quiet steadiness, her embrace of faith, and her unshakable loyalty to her husband and children made her a beloved figure among fans. And when the legal system rendered its verdict sending the couple away, many saw it as a strike against motherhood, against family, against the core values they believed the nation should be built on. And so when Trump stepped in, it was not only a gesture of mercy, but of recognition, a nod to those who see the Chrisleys not as criminals, but as casualties of a broader cultural war. Trump himself has always understood the emotional and spiritual power of symbolism, and the Chrisleys became a potent one by rescuing them from prison. He was speaking directly to the millions who still wear crosses around their necks, attend Sunday service, and feel increasingly alienated by a rapidly shifting cultural landscape where they believe their values are mocked rather than respected. He didn't need to give a speech, the pardon was the speech, and the words spoken through it echoed loudly across red states, small towns, and suburban churches from coast to coast. The Chrisleys' return to public life, however, remains a work in progress. Their children, Savannah, Chase, and Grayson, have carried the emotional burden publicly, especially Savannah, who has become the de facto spokesperson for the family during her parents' incarceration. Her social media presence and interviews kept the family's narrative alive, reminding the public that Todd and Julie were still praying, still hopeful, and still anchored in faith. That presence helped sustain their image as a family under siege, rather than one broken by guilt, and that image played no small part in rallying support for clemency. Now, with the pardon granted, the next chapter begins not just for Todd and Julie, but for their entire public legacy. How they choose to re-enter the public square, whether through television, publishing, or advocacy, will determine whether this moment is remembered as a conclusion or a fresh start. And while critics will continue to point to the evidence, the courtroom testimony, and the justice system's role, supporters will continue to lift up the spiritual victory, the message of forgiveness, redemption, and divine justice that they believe the pardon affirms. Already, conservative commentators, faith leaders, and Christian influencers have used the moment to reignite debates around the fairness of the American legal system, the role of faith in public life, and the cultural double standards that they believe exist between progressive figures and traditional Christians. The Chrisleys' pardon is not just personal, it is political, spiritual, and cultural. It stands as a rallying cry for a demographic that believes the nation has lost its moral compass, and that redemption in America is not equally available to those who live by faith. In forgiving Todd and Julie, Trump has also handed them a platform, a new purpose, and possibly a louder voice than ever before in a world where stories of transformation can become movements. The Chrisleys may now step into roles not just as reality personalities, but as spiritual warriors, advocates for faith-based justice. or even political voices in a time when those roles are being redefined by those who feel left behind by progress. And yet, for all the triumph felt by their supporters, the pardon does not erase the reality that many still believe justice was served in their original convictions. There are those who argue that power, fame, and connections should not shield anyone from accountability, and that the pardon was a political stunt designed to pander rather than uphold principles of justice. As the dust settles on this headline-making moment, what remains clear is that the Chrisleys